Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Space News for Tuesday, March 19th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kyle Henry. Let's talk about what's going on in
never
space.
want to hold again.
Falcon Heavy is on startup.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Status check.
Go Delta.
5, 4, 3.
Ignition.
Our top story, NASA will be conducting an Orion Abort System Attitude Control Motor test tomorrow. The test is scheduled for tomorrow, March 20th at 1:50 p.m. Eastern Time. The test will take place at Northrop Grumman's Elton, Maryland facility and will be streamed live on NASA's Orion Facebook page. Seems like an interesting test. They're getting ready for the in-flight abort test later this year, so obviously you gotta test out your equipment, make sure it's all working. Staying with Orion, the NASA and Boeing team are now working overtime to try and make the June of 2020 launch date. Administrator Brian Steen said that launching on SLS is the preferred option. However, even though the Boeing and NASA team are working overtime, NASA is still going to be looking into other options for launching Exploration Mission 1 on something other than SLS. And I forgot to mention this last episode, but I wanted to mention one other reason why the Orion flight in June of 2020 is such a big deal and why it can't just be delayed. And it is probably the worst reason of all when it comes to space, and it's simply politics. Because what you have to remember is in June of 2020, the entire country of the United States is going to be focused on the presidential election. At that point, the Democratic nominee will be probably confirmed, hopefully. Usually by June, you have a very clear idea of who they're going to nominate in July. President Trump will almost certainly run unopposed as the incumbent president. So June of 2020 is very important to President Trump because if he can go into the general election saying that he revitalized NASA and basically got Orion flying before anyone said that they could, and without having it be delayed beyond his term, that would be a very key thing for states like Florida and I want to say Alabama, but Alabama's very red. Maybe Texas as well, and Louisiana. That sort of the Gulf states that really participate in the Orion and NASA programs. Those states are going to basically want to see something out of the president for NASA, for the NASA workers and stuff. So that's probably one of the reasons why this June of 2020 date is so important to be able to hit and why they can't just delay it for another couple of months as SLS takes longer. I wanted to mention that in the last episode. I just forgot to write it into the rundown. So it is definitely the worst reason for this entire SLS situation, but it is definitely one of the reasons that the administration is looking at for moving Orion to commercial vehicles, because that also gets you 2 commercial flights out of either ULA or SpaceX. So that gets you some California and some Texas for SpaceX as well, and Decatur. Gosh, lived 20 minutes from Decatur for a few years. Couldn't remember it. And in other large spaceship news, we have some Starship updates. First off, a Raptor was installed on the Hopper in Boca Chica. And initial flights will actually only use 1 Raptor instead of 3. These will be very short hops, likely probably going 5 feet or a couple meters off, and then coming right back down. And interestingly enough, the Hopper could actually fly tomorrow. There's been a notice to the residents of Boca Chica that one of the highways that I guess goes by the SpaceX facility will be closed tomorrow between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern Time for spaceflight activities. And Elon has said that short hops will hopefully be taking place this week. Obviously, something could have changed, but SpaceX has issued a notice to everyone, so Hopper could actually fly tomorrow, and I can't wait. But Elon gave some more updates on Hopper in a giant tweet storm that happened over the weekend. One of the main things they said was that Starship and Super Heavy will be built simultaneously in both Boca Chica and in Cape Canaveral, with regulatory approval for both sites being worked on now for flights out of either one. So the first Super Heavy flight could happen out of the Cape. They'd likely use Launch Complex 39A, or it could happen out of Boca Chica in whatever pad they build there. He also said that the Hopper will actually not have a new nose cone, and that the one that we've seen in pictures from locals in Boca Chica is actually going to be used on the first orbital Hopper. And with that, he also showed off a video of a Hopper or a Starship heat shield test, so that the test went well and that the heat shield passed burning at full duration. So a lot of SpaceX news. Main point, we could see a Hopper test and could be talking about the first Hopper test in Friday's episode. Yay! And staying with SpaceX, SpaceX may actually launch crew before Boeing ever launches the Starliner into space. There are rumors about a delay in Starliner's first uncrewed launch, that it could be moved to no earlier than August. As of right now, SpaceX is scheduled to fly crew on or in July, but that will likely slip to late summer or early fall. This move would actually allow Boeing to fly a near final version of their crew vehicle, so it would mean that there would be less time between the uncrewed test flight and the crewed test flight, compared to SpaceX that's going to have, I think, 4 or 5 months between test flights. In reality, Boeing could, in theory, launch a month later with the crewed test flight. But these are, of course, just rumors right now. Nothing has been confirmed yet. This story actually came out on Friday, and I wanted to wait until over the weekend just to see if anything else developed with it. Nothing has as of yet, but could happen very soon. And up at the ISS, NASA will be conducting 2 spacewalks in the next couple of days. The first will take place this Friday, March 22nd, and will be performed by Anne McLean and Nick Hague. The second will take place on March 29th, performed by McLean and Christina Koch. And this will be a historic spacewalk, as it will be the first time that there have ever been 2 women spacewalking at the same time in the history of spaceflight. How are we in 2018 and that's never happened? What the heck, guys? But the goal of both of these spacewalks will be to install new lithium-ion batteries. These are delivered by the HTV in December. David St. Jacques will be assisting the spacewalk from inside the space station and helping the crew don their spacesuits and watching the Canadarm and maneuvering the Canadarm from the cupola. So it'll be interesting to watch these spacewalks on Friday, the next 2 Fridays. But staying with the ISS for one more story, the Nauka module will make one more stop before its launch. The long-delayed Russian science module will stop at the Orion Test facility in August. Nauka was scheduled for launch in 2013, but a leak in a fuel valve caused it to be sent back to the factory, and then the issues just kept piling on. Now it seems like we're finally getting close to launch of Nauka. Right now the launch is scheduled for November. However, it will likely slip into the spring of 2020. We know we're going to get close to Nauka launching when they undock the Pirs module, as Pirs will be undocked and deorbited, and Nauka will take its place on the ISS. I really want to see this module launch. I think it can do a lot of good for the ISS, and it's just a new module, It's also, I think, Nauka would be the base for Russia's next space station that would basically be built at the ISS and then separated in 2024 when the ISS is decommissioned. But that's a story for another time. And Ariane 6's maiden flight will now be sending satellites into orbit. OneWeb will be sending 30 satellites into orbit on the inaugural flight. They will be launching into a near polar orbit with an altitude of 500 kilometers. This flight is right now scheduled for no earlier than the second half of 2020. OneWeb is also signed on to launch on 21 Soyuz rockets to build up their constellation through the Ariane space in French Guiana. as well as they will be launching on the Launcher 1 by Virgin Orbit. And that leads us into our next story. Virgin Orbit has conducted a first stage test of their rocket. This was the first hot fire in the final series of full-scale testing for the Launcher 1. They lit the first stage of Launcher 1, and honestly, that's all we know because they didn't really give us a lot of information in their tweet. They did give us a video, so thanks, guys. But we're getting close to a Launcher 1 flight. I'm excited for that. That thing's going to be really cool. I really want to know some of the integration with this because, you know, they're going to be launching a rocket that's a liquid rocket basically filled up either on the ground or, like, do they have it where they have, like, a fuel line that connects through the wing into the rocket? Or, like, I have a couple of questions about this, but hopefully we'll get these answered as Virgin Orbit gets closer to its first flight. And that's going to about do it for stories, but we have a couple of launches to talk about that happened in the last couple of days, and we have a couple of launches coming up. So, first off, Delta 4 with WGS-10. I'd mentioned that the launch was happening literally as we were recording last Friday's episode. That launch did successfully place the WGS-10 into a geostationary transfer orbit after some initial delays in the countdown. Delta 4 lifted off from Launch Complex 37 at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station at 8:26 p.m. Eastern Time for a successful launch. This is actually the penultimate flight of a Delta 4 in the single stick configuration. They have one more medium flight later this year that is a GPS launch, but other than that, there are no more single stick Delta 4s, just Delta 4 Heavy. Personally, I don't like seeing this go. I really like Delta 4. You guys know that. That's my Delta 4 is my favorite rocket. But, you know, it does make sense to phase it out. And we have two launches that may happen. One of them is confirmed. The other one is not. First off, Vega with the Prism. This is Vega's 14th flight since its debut in 2012. That launch is scheduled for 9:50 p.m. Eastern Time, Thursday, March 21st, from French Guiana. That flight was delayed last week to allow for final checks of the Prism satellite, but they are back on track and ready for launch on Thursday. Next up, Electron will maybe launch the R3-D2 satellite for DARPA. Rocket Labs had announced last week that they were targeting the end of the week for the flight, but there hasn't been an update since, so if this flight's happening, I would have expected an update, but we don't really know. Rocket Labs hasn't told us anything. So Rocket Labs may launch later this week, or they might not. But that's about do it for this episode. I'm Kyle Henry. Thank you so much for watching. We post newscasts like this every Tuesday and Friday. So if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you can stay up to date on what's going on in space. We also post the sources for today's stories in the description down below, so you can check our facts. If something doesn't seem right, let us know. We strive for 100% accuracy in our coverage. Thank you so much for joining us. Goodbye.